Am here today with Just a Bunny, who I know very little about other than his keen commentary on Twitter, and he kindly agreed to join me and do a tier list. Hello, Just a Bunny.
How's it going, Roman?
How can people follow you?
So I'm just a bunny on Twitter at Bunny Rabbit. That's at BUNNYRABERT on Twitter, and that's probably the best way to follow.
Awesome. Today we are going to do a tier list. This is a tier list of Russian propaganda talking points and also some strategies. We had a list of about 60 that we managed to reduce to, I believe, 20, 21, 22, something like that. And we're going to rate their effectiveness today. Now we're going to rate their effectiveness in the West because, like, Russia has internal propaganda. They have really, like, compartmentalized propaganda for different people. They have propaganda for China, propaganda for Central Asia. But we're rating the effectiveness of their propaganda in the West. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. Let's
So,
get started.
yeah, let's get into it. And we'll start with this one right here, eating squirrels in London, specifically, or more generally, that sanctions have impoverished the West. What do you think?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different varieties of this. There's even that entire variety where Europe would freeze were it not for Russia. They have
Yep.
the videos of frozen Europe, and they mostly use that on a domestic audience, but some niche groups abroad definitely make use of that too. So I would actually probably rank it fairly low. I don't know if I'd put it all the way to F, but definitely like D at least.
Yeah, okay, I'd buy that. Yeah, if this was domestic propaganda internal to Russia, it might be S or A tier, but internationally, nobody takes it seriously. I'd give it a high F tier.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just go with F. Something
All right.
has to be F.
All right, so how about this one? Ukraine bombed Donbas for 8 years. Where do you think this one
So
goes?
this one's difficult to place. I would place it high, but I don't know that I'd place it all the way up to like S tier or something like that. It's something that you can tell a lot of people have bought into if you talk to people in the West, but
Yeah.
they've bought into a different version of it, like a more toned down version of it. The original Russian version of it is just completely off base, and I don't think that anyone outside of niche groups takes that seriously.
At the outset of the war, it might have been as high as B tier, but I think it's been just too easy to say to show Donbas or some of these cities in Donbas, they've done worse with one week of Russian liberation compared to 9 weeks of supposed Ukrainian bombing. So I think it's fallen, but yeah, it's surprisingly it has legs. And this despite, a number of people like from Donbass having become public figures on the Ukraine side. Maybe they're not prominent enough, but there's one filmmaker, there's a few journalists who are really popular on Twitter who are from Donbass. So maybe C tier, is that fair?
Yeah, C tier, C plus maybe.
Ukrainian Nazis. What do you think of this one? Ukraine are Nazis and they are fighting Nazis. Russia invasion is about fighting Nazis.
I think the this one is super self-explanatory in the sense that there's a Jewish president in Ukraine. Compared to neighboring countries, Ukraine has less anti-Semitism. Um, like it's a ridiculous statement. Are there people who are like far right or something like that in Ukraine physically? Yes, just like every other country in Europe. But unlike say for instance France, there's no risk of somebody like that coming to power in Ukraine if you look at the election results.
Yeah, this one doesn't really seem to have legs anymore. It's become so convoluted. They try to sustain it, but I would put it on F tier. Are you okay with that?
Sure. Yep. That makes sense.
All right, now this one. I just made a video about this NATO expansion. Did NATO expansion provoke this war, or I should say these wars, 2014 and 2022?
One of the things that blows my mind is that Russia has been quite remarkably consistent in how it treats its neighbors for literally centuries.
Yep.
What Russia is doing right now is literally like there. It doesn't even need an explanation. This is just what Russia does. It's what it's been doing the whole time.
Yeah, I feel like this one has done the same thing that the we bombed Donbas for 8 years has done. Like it was kind of higher tier, but the more people look at it, just the more ridiculous it seems, because
I
because
mean,
all
I
of
think
these
the
countries have asked NATO for NATO's protection. All of these countries have faced genocide at the hands of Russia. So
yeah,
that
the meme says it all. Like if you've seen that meme, how a country joins NATO and how a country joins Russia, I
yep.
think that basically says it all in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah. Now we are in a bit of a bubble, so we want to like see how it appeals to other people. So how effective do you think it is? I think it's somewhere in the middle, but B, C,
I
D.
think this one's a bit more effective, at least in the West. I can tell you for sure. I've bumped into people like in real life who,
Mm-hmm.
and like not an insignificant number of people who believe that it was NATO expansion that provoked Russia in some way, etc. I would actually like to take a moment to emphasize that this is one of the things that Russian propaganda often does. They will I refer to it as agency shifting. So they will take a scenario, redescribe everything in such a way that the party that's given the blame for like the action isn't them, right? At
Yeah,
the end
yeah.
of the day, they're the ones that actually invaded, right? Like NATO's not invading. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, you didn't even have NATO troops in Poland, I think it was, and a number of Eastern European countries.
Yeah,
Like
or as I
you had,
pointed out in my video, the last U.S. tanks left Europe in 2013, right before Russia's invasion. There were no U.S. tanks in Europe.
I would probably put this in B just because of how often I've heard some version of this.
Okay, let's see. Oh, how about this one? Would you like to introduce this one about Russian destiny? What does it mean?
Mm,
What is this propaganda?
Russia has a messianic destiny. I can't recall who said it. I think it might have been Timothy Snyder that said it really nicely, where it's a tyranny in search of an idea. No matter how many times, no matter how many times Russia falls apart and reassembles itself, um, they can reject everything, but the one thing that they won't reject is that they have some sort of great messianic destiny. They need to display their greatness to the world and leave their mark on history.
He must have read my blog, Roman in Ukraine. I have always written that Russia is a government in search of an identity, whereas Ukraine was largely an identity or a nation in search of a government.
Well, who knows? Maybe he did.
All right, so we're special. We have this destiny. I think there's some prophecy involved in this one too. Is that right?
I would say that this one in particular, it's very adaptable. Like it just reinvents itself every time that the regime changes. It was when it was Tsarist days, all for the
Yep.
glory of the Tsardom and yada yada. When it was Soviet days, it was all for the glory of the proletariat paradise, and now it's for the Russian world. Basically the details of it can change. I mean, if you go back to Catherine II, many people don't know this, but she actually had ambitions to conquer Constantinople and kind of
Mm-hmm.
establish Russia as this kind of recreated Byzantine Empire. That's how they stole the title of Third Rome, or invented the title
Sure.
rather.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah.
they
That's a
self-assigned
common feature. Dostoevsky writes about conquering all the way to the Indian Ocean. Billboards often appear in Russia today that show them ruling Alaska, Mongolia, Central Asia. So yeah, it's a common theme. I think if this was internal Russian
if,
propaganda,
if
it
you
would be
recall
what.
that one time that I forget what the event was, but Putin asked some kid where Russia's borders end, and the kid mentioned where the borders end, and he said, "No, Russia's borders don't end anywhere." Right?
Yeah,
And
the
obviously, this plays to that Russian mentality. Like the audience of Russians loves that. Everybody else is looking at that like it's crazy.
Right, and it's everywhere in Russian culture. I'm reading a book about Russia in the mid aughts, and they had cults forming after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the cults hung on to this idea of Russia's destiny to conquer the world. It's everywhere. It's in Pushkin's writing. So
Mhm.
so if this was internal, I would put it all the way up here on S. But we're talking about influence in the West. So how
So
influential are these talking points in the West?
so I would probably put that on D tier. The reason I wouldn't put it on F tier is I have actually met people in real life genuinely believe that Russia is trying to do some wonderful world saving endeavor right now, and we just don't understand, and blah, blah, blah. So there's definitely people who have bought into it. I would say that the people that are most into that are, and this is a group of people that always raises a flag for me, is Western converts to Orthodox Christianity. Because I don't know if you noticed, but most Orthodox Christian churches, they're not very big on converting everybody. They
Mm,
just have their own little thing. The only one that does is Russia, and if you know the history of the modern Russian Orthodox Church, it was founded by Stalin after the church had been disbanded before that, and it was
right,
basically
right.
filled with KGB offering. To
Right,
this day, it's still
he
the
was
case.
trying to convince people to fight against the Nazis, which was how religion was reintroduced to Russia after it was absolutely banned and desecrated by the communists.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
today
but
there are priests saying that that Stalin was good for the Russian church because it created martyrs for us. Insanity.
yeah,
All right, so that's a good segue. Let's rate this one next. Russia as the place of conservative religious values. You see this quite a lot with people who are kind of just fed up with what they perceive as a debaucherous culture in the West. So where would you put? What
yeah.
do you have anything to say about this one? Russia as the defender of Christendom.
I mean, I suppose that actually kind of in the modern incarnation that ties back into the Destiny one, but there's definitely people who believe that. I don't think that it's necessarily that widespread. I could be wrong. I'm I'm observing this from Canada. Maybe it's a bit worse in the states. There's certain people that believe it, but it doesn't seem like something that most people buy at all.
Yeah, I
Russia
think
certainly isn't some sort of
yeah,
conservative sanctuary or whatever.
Yeah, I think people who look closely see that Russia has like the highest divorce rate in Europe, possibly the world, the alcoholism rate, the HIV rate. Like none of the statistics paint this picture. Porn stars per million people, like all of it
Yeah,
looks bad.
I
But
mean it's
I think I think the people whose lives are just focused at criticizing the West just kind of assume that this alternative is out there, and it is pretty popular. I'll put it on B tier next to the NATO talking point. All right, so next let's talk about this little known talking point, but Russia does help migrants travel, like Islamic migrants travel into Europe. They've also made pronouncements that if Stockholm allows the desecration of the Quran, Russia's going to stand up for the Muslims and bomb Sweden out of existence. They say stuff like that. So they have these opposing talking points as well. But since we're rating the influence in the West, and I don't think the West is that sensitive to them, maybe we put this one down on F tier.
yeah, that's probably worthy of F tier as far as influence goes. If we're talking about the West, I would say that it probably has more of an impact on the Arabic world, though.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact I've heard some Arabic people have very positive views of Russia because what Russia does is if you're a communist, then they'll come to you and they'll be the most communist you've ever met. If you're libertarian, they'll come to you and they'll be
Yes,
the most
yes.
libertarian.
That's how I got introduced. I was
And
in
it's
libertarian circles, and Russian propaganda hit like a ton of bricks.
Thing too is obviously there's animosity towards the West and the Arabic world, and therefore it's a much easier sell
Mm,
over there.
yeah. I know in Central Asia they refer to certain mosques as KGB mosques, but we're focusing on effectiveness in the West, so this talking point stays down here on F tier. So okay, you mentioned communists. You mentioned that Russia, if you're communist, Russia will act like the best communist. So let's move on to this one. So let's talk about Russia is the representative of anti-imperialism and generally pro-radical left. What do you have to say about this talking point?
I mean, this talking point has many incarnations, but fundamentally it the different groups like differently as well. Like when it comes to the actual like diehard communists, it'll appeal to its Soviet history,
Yep.
and it'll basically show how like they go out of their way to preserve. Like I mean, Russia got very angry that Ukrainians took down those Lenin statues,
Oh
right?
yes,
And
yes.
something like that is very appealing to people who refuse to believe that Lenin was a monster.
Yep.
Um, the anti-imperialist thing, I mean, honestly, I think it's pretty much straightforward that Russia is an empire itself. So the idea that it's anti-imperialist is it's ridiculous on its face.
Cornell
But
West,
because some
that
people,
NYU professor and sort of like a black activist, was talking about Russia being anti-imperial just recently since the full-scale invasion. So it's definitely
oh,
they
I
definitely
believe
have
that way.
traction.
So the way that they sell that one, like the broader anti-imperialist narrative, is basically they they present it as the West unilaterally starting all wars all over the place. All things that happen basically happen because the West chose to make them happen.
Yeah, right.
And in that sense, they portray anybody else, even if they're an empire themselves, as being the lesser evil at the very least. Although in some cases they go all the way to pretending that Russia is some sort of like tolerant utopia that is just fed up with all of this bad stuff that the West does all over the place.
All right. So what tier is this one?
I mean, this one's definitely more widespread. I wouldn't say that it's like I don't bump into it a lot. I bump into softer versions of it. So I would probably put it in C tier.
C
It's
tier.
clearly like if it has traction with professors and stuff like that, then clearly it's at least C tier. But if
Yeah.
it's not something that I necessarily bump into day to day on a job site or whatever, then I don't know if I'm willing to elevate it all the way up to A tier.
I was going to say A because on these sort of decidedly communist organizations, which are a marginalized voice, but they are a voice, like they seem to have a lockdown on those organizations. So maybe we'll take the average and put it in B tier.
Mhm.
And
Sounds
all
good.
right, so let's swing over from radical left to radical right, the anti globalism club as they present themselves.
So obviously, there's a million flavors of
Yeah,
far
we had
right.
to,
There's
we
everything
really
from
had to make big summaries. Like you could dissect any one of these into quite a few.
to put it broadly, the biggest things that they lean on is just this idea of Russia as some sort of traditional society or whatever. In some cases, it's presented all the way to the extreme end where they'll present it as this mono ethnic state or whatever. That has some sort of long-standing, tradition of preserving itself. Reality is, Russia is again an empire. It conquered many people. Some of those people are dead now; they don't exist anymore. Some of them have been assimilated. Some of them were genocided. But this is obviously not the most appealing thing to all flavors of these
Yeah.
people. Some of these
But
people
I
literally
feel
just
like
believe that
the
it's
propaganda does like they only minimally present Russia. Mostly they focus on criticizing whoever you hate, you as a Westerner, and then just kind of
yep.
putting Russia in lightly as an alternative. So I think the less information they present, the more effective they are because of the reasons you cite.
Yeah, there's general unfamiliarity with Russia, the history, etc., and they make use of that. So um, I would say that really the biggest way that they appeal to people is just presenting Russia as this bastion or sanctuary of traditional values or something like that. And we've already covered the fact that not only do they have high divorce rates, um, they have really high abortion rates. They have really high drug
Yep.
abuse rates.
Right.
Like all of these problems that you see in basically the same sorts of social problems that you see in like a show like Ozark. If you like the character Ruth and her family, the way that they are like that. That's sort of a widespread problem there.
Yep.
But it's happening in a country that's even more backwards.
I feel like in 2014 their propaganda was still targeting all groups, but because they sense the political movements in America, in the United States specifically, and like there's kind of like this insurgent conservative movement, I think they've really tried to ally with them. And they have some even Congress people on their side, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, very
Yeah,
outspoken lady, a little bit crazy in my opinion. Um, so I would put this one all the way up on A tier and make it our first A tier. I think it's more prominent today than the far left propaganda. 14 years ago they were the same, but I think now this one is higher.
it definitely is. It's also definitely a lot more socially acceptable within conservative circles to be openly, pro-Russian and all that. Like that wasn't necessarily the case back, a decade ago.
Right. During the Charlottesville protest that turned into a riot with a brawl with Antifa, they actually chanted "Russia is our friend." I couldn't believe it. That was like
Oh yeah.
2016 or 17, I forget. All right, moving on. We heard this a lot. It's kind of like died down now, but in the beginning, the retreat from Kiev was just a feint. We never even wanted to capture Kiev.
It's funny. This one goes so well with Kyiv in 3 days. That's been something that I've heard from Russians for years and years and years. I was surprised to hear somebody say that in America, like on American media. But yeah, this entire Kyiv was a feint. Like it's just the standard Russian way of every time that they face any kind of difficulty or
Yep.
setback or anything like that, because they can't show any kind of weakness. They
Right.
have to reinterpret history and act as though this is all actually part of a brilliant master plan.
So where would you put this
Um,
one?
oh, it's got to be like D tier. I really don't think. I even think like the biggest Vatniks don't believe that was a thing.
So D or F, your call.
Honestly, it's hard to decide. I can't honestly think of a single person I've met that genuinely believes it. So maybe it should be F.
Okay. But now let's go with a little more of a general one that's kind of related. But Russia is always saying how strong they are. They say that one propagandist, Solovyev, says, we will look at the Baltic states and raise our eyebrows, and then they will know that they better start behaving. All of these like bombastic, ridiculous statements, or that will our generals have been to Berlin before. They know it. They don't even need maps, and we'll go there again if we need to. Or saying how they'll
Yeah, I
roll
mean
all the
that.
way to Lisbon, Portugal. So this Russia is strong narrative. How is that doing?
So that one's kind of funny to place because within Russia, they most Russians probably genuinely believe that.
Yes, as
But
internal
abroad,
propaganda, it's S tier. Yeah,
I don't think it's that strongly held outside of like niche political groups. Like you
yeah,
can definitely find people who are very rigidly pro-Russian, that'll insist on that. But I, I especially don't think anymore. Like after over
yeah.
a year and a half, that anyone believes that.
Too many videos of turret tosses and stuff like that. All right, so
Yeah.
now let's go to another related one. Same thing. Russia is strong, but it's the nuclear threat, and you better compromise with Russia because nuclear war. What do you have to say about this
You know,
one?
one of the frustrating things about hearing the nuclear war one is that a lot of people think that this is a recent development. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
that only started paying attention to this, back last year, are under the impression that this is something Russia just started doing.
Right.
But they were making statements like that back in 2014. They'd made statements like that before too.
I
So it's
believe the
it.
first post-Soviet nuclear threat from Russia came in the 90s during the war in Chechnya. I think the U.S., some kind of U.S. diplomat criticized them, said, hey, you shouldn't be wiping the city of Grozny off the face of the earth because there are a few thousand Chechen fighters there. And they said, stay out of it or we'll have a nuclear war, or something like that. It was under Yeltsin, 99, late 90s, 99. I just looked it up.
I mean, it even goes back to Soviet days, right? Like basically, ever since they got ever since they got the bomb, they noticed that
Mm-hmm.
as soon as they start saying that, a lot of Western politicians, even though the West could wipe Russia off the face of the planet, basically just view that as a we don't want to go there, so we'll back off. So really, what it serves for the domestic audience, it placates them. That's not the important part. I would say that what it ultimately does for them is it gives politicians who are, I guess, fair weather supporters and things like that. It gives them an out. It gives them a narrative justification for being very fair weather about the support.
Yeah.
So I would
As
say it's effective on that level. As far as like actual people being worried about nukes dropping, I honestly don't think anyone is concerned about that sincerely right now, outside of maybe like
yeah.
some strategists or whatever.
The nuclear threats make it really easy for all of Russia's agents, and I guess I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say some supporters who are not agents, but it makes them really easy to encourage some kind of compromise. And I think one of the most
Mhm.
important commentaries about this war came from Estonia's prime minister. I forgot her name, but she quoted
Yeah.
what Russia's former foreign minister said, or former Soviet Union foreign minister said, told her that Russia's negotiation strategy is always to demand something, make huge threats, make a big deal out of it, and force the West to compromise because they believe that the West will always compromise. So I think this
I mean,
effectiveness of the nuclear
it's a
threats.
means.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think the right way to interpret the nuclear threat is the same way you interpret a puffer fish puffing up.
Yeah.
I think that's the proper sense of proportion to that, because what you have to realize is that even even Russians don't want to get nuked. Believe it or not, they really don't.
Yeah.
Putin doesn't want to get nuked. Um, None of them want to get nuked. So they understand that if they ever followed through with that, there will be consequences. That'll be something that will be taken very seriously. So they recognize the value of that narrative as a narrative. And
Yeah.
then the other thing people need to bear in mind too, a lot of these oligarchs, political leaders in Russia have their family living in the West. If you genuinely
That's a
think
good
that they're
point.
about to start unloading that, like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, but as far as effectiveness of the propaganda, so I agree with you that the reality seems pretty slim, but I think the propaganda is pretty effective. It just makes it so easy to demand a compromise, and we heard it from very high level senators and other politicians. So I would put it up in B tier. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, yeah, B tier sounds about right. Like I agree, it's effective, but it's effective in a very specific way. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep, I hear you. Okay, so let's try to move a little bit faster. This video is going long. Let's do, oh, which one should we do next? Historic lands. Historic lands. So Ukraine has never existed. It was created by the Bolsheviks. They also said Finland was created the Bolsheviks. They also said none of the former Soviet republics are real countries. So how is this argument?
Well, I mean, like it's obviously they they readjust it depending on who the target is, but really it just boils down to this: if Russia's ever been there, they insist that they have an eternal right to rule there. So they can take any territory that
Mm-hmm.
has like a vague, loose historical connection to Russia, even if that connection is simply that Russia occupied that area at some point in time, and
Oh,
that's
I know.
justification.
Yep. I know I said move faster, but I have to go on a little tangent here and talk about the craziest incarnation of this that I heard. I heard the Russian propaganda spinning a thread that the Siberians who crossed the Bering Strait thousands of years ago and settled America are Russians, and therefore America's original inhabitants are Russians.
Jesus Christ. Uh,
Yep.
that's the funny thing that that's impossible to communicate to a lot of people is the extent to which Russian mythology it basically works like a ratchet. Just as long as the narrative keeps moving in the same direction and locking there, as long as it inspires some some sort of movement to expand Russia's borders, they're okay with it.
All right, so let's put it in C tier. I think it fell slightly just because they go too far. They've gone too far, and it's become obvious to most of the world that they have a huge desire for conquest. So down a C tier.
I mean, I think it
Earlier,
says a lot. They have to, march armies and tanks in there in order
yeah,
to insist upon it. I think that kind of tells you just how enthusiastic people are about being part of Russia.
yeah. I'd say earlier it was higher, but now it's fallen to D tier. All right, let's talk about trolling and this is like aggressive negative trolling, and this covers a lot of things. This covers like just harassing people on YouTube, insulting people, um, downvoting, doing it in stealthy ways, mass reporting accounts on Twitter. I once worked at a startup, and in a couple days we had like 10,000 registrations from Russia of bots. All right, so trolling in general.
I mean, if we're talking about trolling on the like if they're doing it strategically, like one of the methods that they use on Twitter is the good old follow on follow. It triggers the algorithm to deprioritize you so they
Mm-hmm.
can like mass follow you, mass unfollow you, and it's not something
Yeah.
somebody can replicate without like a bot farm.
Yeah, so
Uh,
we had to create big summaries, or else we'd have 60
so
things instead of
there's that.
20. So
That's fairly
so
effective.
so
Yeah.
the trolling encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses that sort of technical one, and it also encompasses just being really abrasive and
It's
rude in
very
comment
broad.
sections.
Let's put it this way. So the abrasive and rude stuff, I would say that the effectivity, the effectiveness of that is really contingent on the person that they're targeting. If that's somebody that's very put off by that and becomes very easily demoralized by that, it's too unpleasant for them. They can't handle it for one reason or another. Then obviously it's a good way for them to mute. They get people out of the way. But if it comes to other people, people who are a little bit less like people who don't really care that the whatever the troll says doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter to them. If they can laugh it off, then I'd say that that kind of trolling is less effective, and the more strategic kind of troll activities are definitely more effective at that point,
So
like where they're actually manipulating algorithms and stuff.
I was thinking A or maybe B. What do you say?
I'd say B.
B
It
tier.
might have been A, like when it was a bit fresher, like when they first started having their
Mm-hmm.
big platform activities and no one knew what to do. But I think this far into it, a lot of people kind of get what the game is all about, and I
Yeah.
don't think it offends
That's
people the
what
same
we
way that
do,
it
but
used to.
like I think they're really effective like with people who are not as tuned into the Ukraine Russia crisis as we are. So I think that they're really effective with like lower information people who just are busy with the rest of their lives and kind of just get information obliquely. But let's move on to
Yep.
positive trolling. And if you look at the comment section of like any video or any Twitter thread that promotes any of these other talking points, you'll just see hundreds of comments that look like they were written by AI, sort of like devoid of
Yeah.
content, but reinforcing. So I
Yeah.
kind of don't know where to place this one.
I mean, I would say that that's that's probably F tier, man. I maybe somebody out there takes those
Really?
seriously, but
So I would
I,
guess that
I
content creators are kind of like really sensitive for feedback, and this
maybe.
gives them a boost. And maybe
I mean,
if we tie in here the fact that they sponsor so many content creators, and I actually think they
yeah,
sponsored me once. See my very first video, I was a Russian
yeah.
propagandist. I think I was getting $35 a month because I was reposting Russian talking points about their invasion of Georgia. And
I
that
mean,
made a big impression on me back then. I was like, oh my gosh, someone not only follows me, but they want to support me.
I think you're probably right. I think it might just be the case that it's not part of the dynamic that I've interacted in, really,
Mm.
and maybe I'm not taking it seriously enough. But from the perspective of somebody who's a content creator looking for feedback, they can certainly sort of wag the dog by the tail.
So let's B tier.
Yeah, B tier. Let's call it B tier.
All right. So, not your business. This is what Yeltsin told Clinton about all of Europe. He said, Russia is in Europe, America is not Europe. You should give Europe to Russia. Those are his words. Give Europe to Russia because it's none of your business. And of course, today they say that Ukraine is none of your business. Where would you put this one?
I would say that that one is definitely more effective. That's probably A, maybe S, because that's one that's, if it's presented vaguely enough, it flies under the radar for a lot of people. Like there
Yeah.
are a lot of politicians, influencers who genuinely buy that one.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
fallen
go on.
from S tier to A tier. S tier because it's so easy to put it against any other issue, which they do. Fires in Hawaii, well, we're supporting Ukraine instead of taking care of Hawaii. Poverty in Philadelphia, why are we supporting Ukraine? A hurricane in Puerto Rico, why are we supporting Ukraine? But like they've let their ambitions know because of the stuff we talked about down here. Like their lust for expansion is no longer a secret to the world. So I think the not your business argument has fallen to A tier. How's that sound?
Yeah, I just think that that specific one, it's the one that's the easiest to like sugarcoat and
Mm-hmm.
present in a lot of manipulative ways, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And some people genuinely believe it, right? And
Yeah.
not some insignificant number of people.
Oh, we should have
But
we should have put this one next to the far right one, but this is more from 2014. There were LGBTQ rallies in support of Russia, including in New York. See, that's what I said. In 2014, I felt like they were appealing to all of the groups equally, but they sensed the sort of political tides in America and have focused on the right. So I would say they abandoned the LGBTQ pro Russia line completely, and that has fallen to F tier. But in 2014, it was a thing.
yeah, like it's not something you hear about these days. So I would probably say F tier, like only F tier at this point.
Firehouse of Falsehoods. Now, this summarizes an awful lot, which probably makes it hard to categorize. But, like, they just go for everything at the
I
same
mean, okay,
time.
so to summarize the fire, it's effective. It continues to be effective. It's they introduce so much false information that the sheer amount of effort it takes to get to
Mm-hmm.
the bottom of any one of the narratives is enough to dissuade most people from actually looking into it, which
Yep.
functionally accomplishes what they want. Like it gets people to lose interest, drop out, or not dig any deeper. I would say that this one it continues to be pretty effective, although some of the stories, the specific narratives, are obviously they've
Yes.
been used and abused to the point where they have no life left to them.
I think you could make that general statement about Russian propaganda. Like any specific narrative fails, but it's just the quantity and persistence. So I would put this one up on S tier. Is this our first
Yeah,
S tier?
as
Would
a
you agree?
methodology, it continues to be effective, and to be perfectly frank, it will continue to be effective, just because it exploits just the fact that it takes too long to get to the bottom of everything,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep. And
So
I think you could make those points about this next one. I was thinking of not having this next one because it's too similar to Firehose of Falsehoods, but I think Firehose of Falsehoods sort of refers to the breadth of their lies, that they're talking to everybody at the same time. As we can see here, Christians, Muslims, to the left, to the right, to libertarians, to nationalists, to LGBTQ. But the rabbit hole kind of refers to the depth. And I'll give you a couple examples. So, one example is when they shut down that Dutch airliner MH17. They
yeah,
weaved like such a detailed story about a Mexican air traffic controller who was working in Kiev, and he had to tell this lie and leave the country and all these things, and it was all fake. It was all fake. Another example of this goes back to World War II, where they said the Russians were having a victory parade, and the Allied generals Montgomery and I think Patton were watching the Russian parade, and one of them said, "At least you're still my ally," or something like that, or "We better stick together." All false, all made up, but it was like so detailed, and just by hearing those details, you think, "Well, this must be true. Look how detailed it is." And arguably, one more example. This will be my last, and I want to hear what you think. Just this week, that lady from the right, Laura Loomer, she did this investigative report of some tattoo covered Nazi who works for the CIA and was in Ukraine and was also in the January 6th protests, and like I kind of wanted to do a thing on it, so I started reading it. And you can go as deep down as you want to go. Like you could spend hours just like sifting through all of these fascinating details, but you're like, I had to take a step back, and I was like, none of this changes the fundamental facts, of Ukraine was invaded. Russia wants to eliminate Ukraine as a nation. The Budapest Memorandum, like none of it changes the facts. But man, she just builds you a huge playground for your conspiracy theories.
I mean that's something that they use domestically too. They make very generous use of like mysticism and things like that to try and bamboozle their local population all the time. The amount of predictions that fortune tellers and yada yada have made
Yep.
allegedly about Russia's greatness in the future and all that, like it plays well to their domestic audience too. And there's all sorts of stories like this. Fundamentally, the best way to think of them is as a chew toy. If it's not leading somewhere, if it's not adding like relevant information, then best way to look at it is just as a
Mm-hmm.
distract.
Yeah,
It's
relevant
something to occupy your
information.
time.
Yeah. That's what I thought of when, and then I said, okay, enough of this Laura rumor stuff. Like, it's all interesting, but like, even if it's true, it doesn't change the fundamental facts.
Yeah, like for its target audience, it might be perfect, but I would put
But
it
it's
in
a
B. I
small
don't think
audience.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. Like I don't think that as far as like if I, I know you're mostly trying to rank it in terms of like how effective it is on a Western audience, but I mean I guess I'm kind of thinking of it in terms of like the overall impact of it. Um, it's definitely effective within its group. It's probably not nearly as effective when it comes to like decision makers
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
what ordinary people walk around believing.
All right. Cool. Whataboutism. The word whataboutism has its own Wikipedia page. I think with as far as this full-scale invasion of Ukraine is concerned, usually they say, "What about Iraq? What about Afghanistan?" The actor Woody Harrelson sort of repeated this talking point, so they're definitely out there.
even if you grant them the proposition that all of this other stuff that this other country did was also bad, it in no way improves that what they're doing is bad. So it
Right.
really fundamentally tries to just kind of distract people. It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
It
a
doesn't.
lot can be said. A lot can be said why the Iraq War is a false comparison. I was against the Iraq War. I was also in the Iraq War, uh, but uh, but nevertheless, the comparison is there. It has legs. Maybe I would put this in A tier.
Yeah,
How's that sound?
yeah. It's effective. It'll continue to be effective. The thing is that it's always possible to find superficially similar things.
Okay, genocide of Russian speakers. Russia invaded to stop the genocide of Russian speakers. I was in Lviv in 2014 in Western Ukraine, and some people told me that their parents or their some relatives or friends who lived in Russia uh, asked them to evacuate immediately because Russians were being massacred in the streets. When in reality, there was a Russian street musician, some blind guy who played the accordion and sang songs in Russian. He wasn't super popular in Lviv, but he was there uh, nevertheless. So in Russia, again, almost everything is S tier because in Russia everything is true, or nothing is true. But how? So I would you agree with me that this was a narrative in 2014 that there's a genocide of Russian speakers, but this kind of has fallen by the wayside since then because all of these Russian speaking cities, or many of them, have been wiped off the face of the earth. So it doesn't make sense for them to go on about this genocide of Russian speakers.
I mean, they're the primary perpetrators of genocide against Russian speakers in Ukraine.
Yes, yeah.
So
So
it's literally absurd for Russia to make that claim. But I mean, beyond that, obviously, you knowing the history of like how it was even that Russian became so widespread in Ukraine, it has the additional cynical element to it that of sort of resenting the people whom they subjugated for trying to preserve their own identity on top of everything. And I mean, Ukraine was never like everybody knows that a lot of cities in Ukraine spoke primarily Russian, right? I grew up in a Russian speaking family myself. I had to learn Ukrainian on my own later in life.
mhm. All right. Let's last one. Uh, this sort of idea that nothing is really true. Like, this could be both like when the invasion happens, they publish all these stories that Ukraine is filled with Hollywood movie sets. I think this one also covers the idea that, well, Russia says one thing, Ukraine says another thing. We can't really know what the truth is, or the truth is all probably somewhere in the middle. Everyone has their propaganda, sort of that type of thing.
This is actually kind of an interesting one too, because so one of the consequences of exploiting this kind of this is kind of a passive belief that a lot of people have that like oh, this person has this bias, that person has that bias, so clearly the truth's somewhere in the middle, etc., etc. Um, what's exploitable about it is that it actually makes it possible for somebody to manipulate somebody else's opinion by moving the extreme end because that actually
Yep,
moves the
exactly.
middle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're always gonna settle on the middle, the extremists win. Yep.
But as far as effectiveness, that one I would say is it, the specific narrative that everything in Ukraine is Hollywood. Obviously, I don't think that works on most people. But as far as the exploitation of like the truth being somewhere in the middle, I'd say that that one is effective and will continue to be effective.
Yeah, I see. Probably I lumped in two different ones into this icon. So if it was just like the sort of in betweenism, that would be S tier. Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's well, let's keep it up there and just focus on the sort of the truth is somewhere in the middle. Everyone has their propaganda. Let's. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah. So that right there, that's probably S tier. As far as everything being Hollywood set in Ukraine, that
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people buy. I think that's probably like D or C, like C
right.
minus at best.
Yeah, I agree. I think they didn't intend for that one to stick. They just wanted to delay any decision making as long as possible. They wanted Western
Yes.
decision makers to say, "Well, let's just wait and see what's actually happening because we don't really know." That, which is also a very clever
Which,
tactic.
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's lost on a lot of people when they hyper focus on debunking every narrative is they fail to step back and appreciate that there's actually like a physical purpose to the narratives that they're putting out there, right? Like they have objectives that they want to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish. They're not speaking
Yes.
to communicate information. They're speaking to accomplish objectives, and that doesn't necessarily entail lying to you. It can entail lying to you. It can entail telling you half truths. It can entail telling you. It can even entail telling you things that are true and just simply omitting all of the other relevant information. Um, as long as it accomplishes the thing that they're trying to accomplish, then they're happy to use it.
Very
It
good.
sucks.
Well, this was fun. Thank you for joining me. I think it was insightful. It was for me. So there you have it. That is the Russian propaganda tier list. And after reflecting on it for a day and editing the video, I have this observation, which I promise you I did not intend. The ones near the top are all more information strategies, where the ones near the bottom are specific ideas. And I think that's right. I think specific ideas do not withstand scrutiny, but like polluting the information space, spinning these wild theories, or just broadcasting all of the arguments all of the time to everybody. Those kind of strategies seem better, or casting doubt on one's ability to perceive the real world, saying nothing is really true. That's where they get their mileage, and this turns out to be very similar to something that was observed 10 years ago during Russia's first invasion of Ukraine. It was observed by two Nobel laureate writers, including Mario Vargas Llosa from Peru, and they said that Russia uses words to destroy meaning as opposed to create it. So I hope this has been of interest. Till next time.